Fellas, it's the Georgia show. It's Georgia camp week. We heard from Kirby Smart today. Jake Rowe, you were there, and the players are about to get it popping tomorrow. Rusty Manziel also on with us, and we'll have a special guest, Matt Godwin, former director of player personnel with UGA, and he's got a story or two to tell, and he knows ball. But before he hops on, Rowe, why don't you just catch us up to speed? You got a piece over at DawgsHQ with your takeaways from Kirby Smart starting the festivities today.
Yeah, pretty uneventful kickoff to spring practice, or not spring practice, preseason practice. It's about an hour past my bedtime, I feel like, but it's only 8:30. It was. I'm actually surprised. They've got 4 foot injuries to begin preseason practice. I'm surprised that's basically it. I know that we could talk all day about, those 4 are kind of one of those guys is on the men, Michael Williams. I guess all of them are kind of on the men. Branson Robinson and Smile Munden are running, but I don't know, man. That seems like I don't want to, knock on wood or whatever for you guys out there who, are the ones that worry about injuries, but that's a pretty good place to start from, with 4 guys that are banged up, but they're on the men to start preseason practice. There's going to be more. We all know there's going to be more. A couple other things that stood out to me, that Kirby's always worrying, man. Kirby is always concerned about something, and he's concerned about D-line depth. He's concerned about offensive tackle depth. We can move on to the process. I mean, listen, man, we got this, Rusty. We got this this media guide, right? That's the point of the media guide this year, y'all. You want to talk about like not putting a player on there, not singling anybody out, not putting a coach on there. Rusty, they didn't even put David Cooper on there.
They just put
I don't know.
I think David would have loved to be on the front of
that. It says 23. It says it's got the little thing of Sanford Stadium that you can barely see. It says media guide, and then underneath it all it says toughness, connection, resiliency, and composure. Very understated. So you know that the process is a big part of everything. We dive into all that over at DawgsHQ, where, by the way, you can get 1 month for $1, or you can get 25% off of an annual subscription right now if you want to come check us out. But very understated thing. He talked about a lot of different stuff, and you can come over to DawgsHQ to see all that. But those were the things that kind of stuck out to me. I don't know what's going on with that media guide, man. I've never seen one that didn't have a player on it.
I think that they were going to announce Guthrie's was going to be on the cover, and it didn't get Guthrie's didn't get announced till today, so it didn't make it.
There goes Rusty. He's going to Guthrie's. I think Kirby might have designed the front, man. I don't know. Maybe he had some artistic input into the design of the thing.
It didn't dawn on me that it might be just completely intentional to do it that way until I started showing it just now. Like maybe it's just kind of one of this, hey, listen, this is a team deal. I don't know. Maybe that's a symbolic, the New England Patriots running out being announced as a team in Super Bowl. What was it?
Yeah, that first one they won.
Yeah, whatever it was. I can't remember what Super Bowl it was, but yeah, that one that they won against the Rams. They wanted to be announced as a team, and maybe that's what this is. I don't know.
I was interested to hear a couple things. The injuries that you pointed out, he pointed out his observations of Carson Beck as a leader, and he said that he's just kind of an even-keeled dude, and we don't really know much about him. And when I say we, I mean the people that aren't covering the team day to day, because he hasn't really had to speak to the media too much. He's kind of been behind closed doors, and that's Kirby's observation of the guy. And his word to all the quarterbacks, no matter who wins the job, is just to be where your feet are. I think that's good advice for anybody, especially someone that's trying to be a quarterback of the best team in college football, but also all the guys that are already on campus that have been there since spring and summer, how he has to kind of explain to the younger dudes, hey, it's not summer anymore. This is the real deal.
Sorry, I'm muted and unmuted. jumping back to, kind of, what you're talking about with the quarterbacks about being where their feet are. Man, I thought one of the best things he talked about today was, hey, I don't want these guys, and he didn't use prisoner, but that's the word I'm going to use. I don't want these guys to be prisoner of the results. I want them to be prisoners of the process. I want them to be obsessed with the process, obsessed with getting better. And honestly, man, if you go, jumping back even further, if you go back to spring when Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift, I know I've brought this up many, many times on this show, but it is a quote that has stood out to me, and I will respect the kid from here to the end of time. I don't care if he ends up selling Chevys or if he ends up, as a Hall of Fame NFL quarterback. But Brock Vandegrift to saying, listen, I would have transferred if I didn't think I was getting better. That's the guy that the process means something to him, and I think Kirby's got a good group. I think he's got a good group of guys there in that quarterback room that aren't going to be obsessed and aren't going to be prisoners to the results. They're going to buy into the process. And, if that's what he wants out of that group, I think that's what he'll get out of them. And the thing about Carson Beck kind of stood out to me as well, Wes, where he called him very laid back. Kirby Smart, Rusty, not very laid back.
No, and I apologize. I think my 1987 Atari laptop just crashed, and it's going to be a bad day tomorrow. So I switched to my other computer, so hopefully I won't lose me again. But yeah, you could tell watching a little bit today that it's go time for Kirby. You flip that switch, and I think that's one of the things I'll be interested tonight to talk with Matt Godwin. And again, if you guys didn't see the first podcast we did with Matt Godwin, what a great piece of information. I mean, this was Kirby Smart's right-hand man basically for a long, long time. And I'm interested to hear how he talks about transitioning from recruiting into camp mode and what's that like day-to-day, things like that. So we did talk to Matt, and he did turn his phone off. He did turn the dings off. So I
was going to tell him if y'all didn't. So
yeah, he got the iMessage alerts taken care of for us.
So he's going to be good to go tonight. But excited about those types of questions from him to talk about those types of things and where he is and what he thinks the Georgia. I want to talk some personnel with him. We didn't really dig in too much, but, we're not going to dig into the 2024 class with him, but the guys that he evaluated and signed under, when he was there, I want to know what he thinks about these freshmen and, how these guys can make an impact.
Rusty, I heard that he knows exactly what KJ Bolden's going to do, and he's going to reveal it on the show tonight.
That's why we got him on.
I tell you, man, this is one. I'll tell you this. This is one of those ones that we haven't had in a while, where there might be 3 schools when he turns on that TV station, or he turns on our YouTube station Saturday night on our own 3 YouTube station channel, that might think they're going to get him. So I'm very interested in how the next couple of days go. And listen, I was at Buford yesterday, and, I do the Falcons this morning. So I was in the neighborhood, went and watched practice, and I didn't really push him too much. I know what he's going through this week. And I'll say this, that everybody around Buford, it was like, look, he's not saying much, even, Dylan Raiola was there, and, KJ's keeping it close to the vest of his decision right now.
Our message board is on fire with threads just called KJ Bolden.
Yep.
KJ Bolden.
Yep.
So we'll find out. We'll find out very soon.
But we're going to watch that Saturday night on our channel. So Josh Newberg will host that. I think I'm actually going to go. His mother invited. I've covered AJ since he was a ninth grader, and I think I'll go regardless of where he ends up and be there for us.
Must see YouTube viewing there on the On3 YouTube channel. Also, must see viewing tonight as Matt Godwin joins us, and I will not cover up his face there. What's up, Matt? Thanks for coming on tonight, man.
Hey guys, how are y'all doing?
Great.
We're good, man. We're good. How are you?
I can't complain. I'm living the dream over here in Atlanta. So had some barbecue tonight and ready to talk to y'all.
If we got the iMessage muted, that's the only thing I need to know before we start, man.
Yeah, so I got a lot of crap last time from just about everybody, friends, family, my mom. So we've addressed that. It was not my phone's last time. It was the iMessage on my computer. So We
there you
figured
go.
out how to turn the notifications off for that. So we're
Not only that, but a little less sunshine on the face than last time. You'd think you'd played a little golf the last time we had you on, so it looks like you maybe didn't just get off the golf course this time.
exactly. Yeah. So I've been in the office 5 days a week, so I have not been golfing since then. But I need to get back out there.
Where'd you get your cue tonight, Matt?
I'm sorry. Oh, it was Old Brick Pit right off Peachtree Road. So it's about 2 minutes from my apartment. It's about 5 minutes from my office where I work. So it's a perfect spot. But right next to Peachtree Golf Club.
Check it out.
Not a bad spot.
It's a good one.
So Matt, we're just talking about Kirby firing camp up. Just heard from him today as the ceremonies begin on the 2023 season. And not a lot of fanfare, as you might expect. But one thing Kirby talked about was how summer and spring have changed over the years, and guys are around the building, around the weight room all spring and summer. There's not a hard line in the sand of guys reporting for fall camp anymore. How do they break that up now? How do they flip that switch on the mentality of these dudes who are just having to, some of the younger guys who maybe don't know what they're getting themselves into?
Yeah, I mean, like you referenced, I mean, the calendar has changed for everybody. It's changed for staff. It's changed for players. I mean, all around. And really, when you look at it, I mean, what these kids do on a daily basis, year over year, is pretty impressive. Really, when you look at the calendar, the time of year they get off is basically May after their spring semester ends. And they get a little bit of time off late June, early July with a discretionary period. But outside of that, I mean, these guys are working. I think, I got a cool story on this. So going back to 2021, obviously first national championship season, May comes around, classes end, and, not many players hang around in May. And Devontae Wyatt was a guy. He said, he went to the coaching staff, said, guys, I don't want to go home to Decatur. I don't want to go home to Atlanta. I want to stay here. I want to take some class because when I go home, I don't eat right. I don't work out right. I don't do what I'm supposed to do. And obviously that was a good sign for that team and that player. But, really, these guys, they're working all through June, all through July. In July, they're doing a lot of 7-on-7. They're doing a lot of conditioning. They're doing a lot of lifting. And, obviously spring practice is a big evaluation period for the staff. You get a good idea of where your roster's at, what you got. But, what happened in spring isn't necessarily going to translate over to fall camp because that month of July is huge. And there's a huge opportunity for guys to really develop some strength, maybe start moving a little bit better, reshape their body. So just because a guy was doing something in April doesn't mean he's going to do it in August. And that goes both ways. A guy might have done really well in spring and he might come in August not ready. And then you might have a young guy that puts on 15 pounds in July and looks really, really good. And he's a different player than he was in the spring. So really, these guys work incredibly hard. They care a lot. They're invested in themselves. They're invested in the program. And they don't get much time off. And that's not just Georgia, that's everywhere.
Matt, we'll see the picture behind you there. I don't know if you can see the screen with Cedric Van Pran. And we've had some conversations, you and I over the last couple of months about him. And tell me and what, me and you've talked about before, and tell this audience how big a deal that was to get Cedric Van Pran back and how close was that for him to actually go in the NFL?
Yeah. Cedric was a guy that, we felt like we had to get back. And it's not just the fact that Cedric Van Pran's a good player, because he is. He's a really good player. He's, preseason all SEC, all the accolades, all that. But what Cedric Van Pran represents as a person is what separates him. He's the best leader that I think I've ever seen or been around. Incredibly intelligent, deeply invested in the program. This guy gives us all every single day, and it's a testament to him. But with Cedric, we were going back and forth with him in January, and the decision date, I think, to declare for the NFL draft was like January 16th or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, those were some late nights. Going back and forth between Kirby, Cedric, all these different parties, because we had to get him back, and we felt like if we could get him back, we're going to have a really good chance this year, just because that's what he means to the team, and the guys care about him, they love him, and we all love him. We wanted Cedric to be there, and ultimately, Cedric came back because he loves Georgia, he loves the fans, he loves his teammates. And, I don't think he felt comfortable leaving before he was ready. So, that was a fun week there in January, kind of before I got out. But obviously, I mean, tremendous person. I mean, I can't say that enough. And obviously, I'm excited to see what he does this year and, down the road in the NFL.
Matt, I've heard Kirby reference this a lot. Coming into camp, he talks about the NCAA has been, good enough to allow us to do walkthroughs. And I mean, I don't know if we want to get in the weeds as far as what the rule is, because I'm sure it's probably more complicated than it should be. But about how much have they been able to be hands-on and walk through and stuff at this point now that they've started? And how much have they been able to get done in terms of being ready to hit the ground running in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the coaches have been doing some meetings, but to be honest with you, I mean, there's not a whole lot they can do. It's really up to the players. And what the team gets out of July depends on the kind of people you have on your roster. And if you have a really good roster with really good people like we have, they're going to get a lot out of the month of July. Whereas if you go to some programs around the country where their guys may not be invested, they're not going to get a whole lot out of July, because the onus is on the players, really, because they're doing player-led 7-on-7. So, they're not doing a whole lot of install or stuff like that in July. It's really just focus on conditioning, doing some concepts that have been ingrained in the offense and defense for years. So it's not a whole lot of new material. It's just kind of getting the wheels moving in the right direction, so that when camp kicks off, everybody's ready to roll. But really, the month of July and the summer, I mean, it's player driven. It's how bad do they want it? Do they want to get ready for camp? And, hopefully the answer for us is yes. And I think it will be. So
what's a typical, go ahead, Wes.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Kirby mentioned the connection of the team that he hopes to see again. And I think a lot of that comes through Cedric Van Pran, as we spoke about earlier, but it has to be more than just him. And with a new quarterback stepping into that role, and all the guys that are back, but, once again, a lot of them leaving for the NFL. How surprised were you this time last year to see that leadership not miss a beat from all those senior leaders who did go to the draft, and just to see SVP and guys like that immediately pick it back up? Because it seems like now there's been enough of a blueprint laid for this team to kind of know what it takes to be player driven, player leaders, and holding each other accountable.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we lost a lot of that 2021 roster. I mean, absolutely. And I think coming off of it, there was definitely, I wouldn't say concern, but it was just a question mark, who's going to step up for us? And really, you had guys like Cedric, and you had a few others that, really immediately stepped up and kind of took the reins from the Nakobe Deans of the world, and, the Quay Walkers of the world, the Trayvon Walkers, all these different really, really good players that we had that were good leaders. Those were big shoes to fill. And like I said, it was a question who was going to step up, but really, I think it became pretty apparent that we had a good group last spring, 2022. Now, I don't think any of us could have said, yeah, we're going to win the national championship, because you never think about that. It's always the next day. It's the next practice. You don't think about stuff down the road like that. But, I mean, we had a really good group. We still have a really good group. And really, it starts with Cedric. But, I mean, you got some good veteran players on that team. I mean, Xavier Truss, Lab McConkey, Kendall Milton. I mean, these are good players, but really, really good people that are good leaders. So it's always a question year over year, season to season. But the way we've recruited and evaluated, that's a big part of the evaluation is the person. And I think that it's become increasingly important in the NIL age and everything that's going on in college sports is you got to get good people. So,
Matt, talk about a typical camp day. So this is the first year you haven't been in a camp, but you've been in every Kirby Smart camp. Talk about a typical camp day. What you don't have to get into the whole itinerary, but tomorrow's practice for those players. What's tomorrow look like for those guys? Meetings all day. How does that work?
Yeah. It's a lot. I think back in the day, you'd hear about 2-a-days, and I think a lot of people have been through 2-a-days, and college football and football in general has evolved to where that's not a thing per se, but what you get is walkthroughs in the morning. You get some meetings in the morning, and they kind of break up. They go eat lunch, hang out a little bit, come back for more meetings, probably an hour and a half of meetings, and then it's practice. So you're getting, I mean, I don't know how many hours of football a day, but you're getting 2 separate sets of meetings, 2 separate sets of walkthroughs, and then a 2-hour practice or whatever it is. So it's a long day. And, from a personnel standpoint and the role I was in, man, August was fun because you're coming off that July mad sprint recruiting weekend. And, really in August, it's just about kind of evaluating some players, cleaning up the board, getting ready for official visits, getting ready for game days, getting ready for the fall evaluation period and kind of mapping that out. Who's Kirby going to see? Who's, office coordinator going to see, et cetera. But, really when you're in that DPP role, you just get to watch practice and you're evaluating the roster. And, it's fun. But when I think about camp, I really break it up into 2 segments. And I'm not saying this is the correct way to look at it. This is always the way I looked at it, is you have pre-scrimmage number 1, and then you have post-scrimmage number 1. And pre-scrimmage number 1, in those first practices, the coaches are just trying to get the guys to, play fast and physical. You're evaluating the roster a little bit, but really you're just trying to create good tempo and intensity in practice to the point that we get to that first scrimmage plays out. And then after that first scrimmage, you're really focused on the depth chart and personnel and, okay, who's actually going to play. But early on, you're installing and you just want the guys to run and hit. And, it sounds simple, and it really is, because that's the important thing is getting the guys in the rhythm of practice so that when you're 2 weeks out from that first game, then you can start to hone in on game plan and scheme and situational football and all that stuff. But early on, we're trying to see those guys go play ball because they haven't really played football since April.
So on one hand, it feels like when camp starts, recruiting is just it almost feels like it's done. But I feel like we know enough about Kirby Smart to know that that's not 100% the case. So what does it have? What is it like with the coaches? Because right now we're looking at a period. I'm not going to ask you about these things specifically because I wouldn't want to put you on the spot. But KJ Bolden's about to make a decision. Nate Frazier's about to make a decision. There's communications going to be ongoing in the coming days. How hard are they working on that during camp? Is it a grind for them to kind of balance that with decisions coming up?
Yeah, I think it's really tough for the coaching staff because you can't just put recruiting down. You got to maintain that level of communication that you've had since last year or however long you've been recruiting the kid. So, you're stacking long days on top of each other, and a lot of it's focused on football and the practice. But, the coaches have to spend at least an hour a day recruiting, whether that's texting, whether that's calling, getting on Zoom, whatever it may be. So the recruiting never goes away. As you said, and especially with Kirby. Kirby, puts such an emphasis on recruiting that you can't just neglect it. And you hear whispers from other programs around the country where it's like, yeah, man, we get to August and our coaches put the phones down. They're focused on ball, they're focused on the season. And rest assured, that is not the case at Georgia. So you recruit 24/7, 365, and that work-life balance is always tough in football. But in August, it is especially tough for those 10 full-time assistant coaches.
Man, give me 2 minutes on Michael Williams. That's a kid that you have obviously evaluated. That was a big deal, flipping him back from USC. But Michael Williams, you saw some flashes in the last year, especially in the Ohio State game and some of the things he did. But talk about Michael Williams and where you think he is entering his second fall at University of Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, I think, is a guy that a lot of people are excited about, and rightfully so. And I think Michael's freshman season was interesting because if you go back and look at that Oregon game, he actually started. First college game, starts as a true freshman, and Tramel Walthour ended up being the starter pretty much all the year. But Michael really came on strong at the end of the year. And what you get with Michael is you get length, you get flexibility, you get power, you get the ability to bend. And he's just a really well-rounded, focused football player. And I remember when he arrived, last year, this is, he's an early enrollee. He gets there in January. And I remember February, he's out there running on the field by himself, just running tempo runs, just sprinting 53 yards one way, taking a 20-second break, and then 53 yards back the other way. And when you have a freshman that's been there for 1 month that's doing that kind of stuff, you have a guy that might have a chance to be pretty good. So I'm excited to see what he does. When you're talking about that defensive end position in the defense, he's really what you're looking for. He's 6'5", he's 260, 265, and plays the run equally as well as he plays the pass. And, that's what Georgia's looking for, because we're never going to sell out for the pass and sacrifice the run game. And it takes a special kind of player to be really well-rounded and be good at both. And I think Michael has the opportunity to do that. So I'm excited to see what he does. But again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but really, really good kid, really good person. And a lot of times that's what makes somebody a good player. So
I went down and shot his commitment video, I guess, in March of his junior year. And I had it for about 2 weeks, and he was like, we're going to put it out. And then the NCAA changed that rule where you could do those June visits and do the summer visits. And I remember Michael calling me going, hey, put that video away for a while. And next thing you know, I thought, man, I'm never going to use that video because he's committed to USC. And so luckily I held on to that video, and you guys were able to flip him back. But I'll never forget, I had a Georgia commitment video of Michael Williams for about 2 weeks. And when the NCAA changed the summer OV rules, obviously that opened him up to take visits. And he went out to LA. USC hadn't committed for a while. So that was a kind of a behind the scenes crazy part of that recruitment.
Yeah, and I remember that was a tough time for me and everybody involved. Obviously, Michael was somebody we had really prioritized. I mean, he's an in-state kid. He's got all the measurables, all the athletic ability that you want in that position. And he commits to USC. And I remember the day it happened. It's probably 11 p.m. that night. We're in our staff text thread, and it was like batting down the hatch. It's like it's time to go.
Yeah.
Not that we had put it in neutral, or not that we weren't actively recruiting him, but it was like, whoa, it woke us up. To be honest with you, and obviously, Trey Scott did a great job with that, but really Del McGee kind of
Columbus.
There you go. That Columbus. Those roots run deep, so I'm glad it worked out, and obviously, we're glad to have him. So.
Michael Williams is also the owner of a 5-star handshake. Trayvon Walker, Laramie Tunsil, Trayvon Walker's dad, Steed Walker. Those guys are the ones that had that index finger go about halfway up your forearm when they shake your hand. Like you're shaking the hand of somebody that's full grown at that point. Matt, I wanted to ask you, you're very familiar with this second year class. We just got through with what we call a second year surge series over at our site. And I wanted to ask you just in general, obviously you know Malachi, we know Michael, who from this class that's left, because they lost all the Washington boys out of this class already, and a bunch of other guys. Who out of this class that's left are you excited to see, or maybe think has a chance to break out this year from that 22 class?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple guys that stick out. One immediately is a guy like Marvin Jones. Battled some injuries last year, came in, last June. Obviously, was very highly touted.
Hey, can I break in right here? Let me ask you a question on Marvin Jones. So he had a torn labrum, correct?
Yes.
And that happened pretty early in the season, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that was lingering from his high school days, and this is a guy that gutted it out. He's a tough kid, he's intelligent, and I think he showed some toughness and resiliency, which are four of the traits that are central to the program. And this guy showed a lot his freshman year, but really, I think he had a challenging time last year, coming in with a bit of an injury. It's hard to play early in our defense. Make no mistake. We have guys play early every year seemingly, but they earn it, and I think, the odds are stacked against him in just a little bit with that injury, but I'm excited to see what he does because there's a lot of opportunity at that position. Obviously Nolan Smith is gone. He went down last year with the pec injury, and then you had Robert Beal step up and start for him. But and you got Chaz Chambers coming back, but there's a lot of opportunity at that position. I'm excited to see what Marvin does. I know what kind of ability he has. He's a really intelligent person, on the field, off the field, and that goes a long way in that defense. Make no mistake. So he's definitely a guy I'm looking out for. And another one is Kristen Miller. And I'm not going to say this guy's going to break out, but I think the interior defensive tackle depth is obviously – it's always a point of concern with Kirby Smart. Make no mistake. He – and back when I was there, we spent a lot of mental energy and time worrying about offensive line and defensive line. And Kristen Miller is a guy that I think has a great opportunity to step up to see what he can do. Obviously it's well documented that Barry Alexander – transferred out, went to USC. Bear was able to make his way on the field last year, flashed some twitch on third down, and now it's kind of Kristen's turn because you've got a good nucleus of veteran guys coming back, but who's going to be that fourth guy and potentially even pass up some of those veteran guys? So I'm excited to see what Kristen does. He's got the frame you're looking for. He's a good athlete, but ultimately, a lot of this is going to be decided over this next month.
Kirby said today that he is worried about the depth at tackle on the offensive line, and it doesn't surprise me because it's Kirby, but, we're looking at this O-line coming in as one of the best in the country. I mean, how big of a concern can it really be?
I think the number two.
You asked that because let me tell you that Kirby Smart is worried about every single slot on that depth chart. I mean, the sixth corner, the seventh ILB, he's worried about it all, and that was my job to be worried about it as well. So I can kind of see where he's coming from, just because you have guys that haven't gotten major snaps. There's guys that have a lot of ability, like Monroe Freeling, Austin Blasky's been in the program, Ernest Green has a lot of ability, battled some injuries last year, and then obviously Amarius Mims ended up starting 2 or 3 games then last year. So there's talent. We evaluated these guys. We signed them for a reason. There's just not many in-game reps. And, we practice for a reason. And in Georgia, we practice the right way. But you don't know how a guy's going to react once they get to an in-game situation. So I wouldn't say that there's not depth. It's just as much as there's just uncertainty. So you don't know. And obviously, we'll hash that out over the next month. I'm excited to see how that position shapes up. I think a lot of people are penciling in Amarius Mims, and I think that's that's pretty fair based on the way he played at the end of last season. But it's going to be a good competition, and obviously it's an important position. I mean, if you look at our offensive line over the last few years, I mean, since Kirby's been here, I used to dig up these numbers on a regular basis, but I think we've had more offensive linemen drafted than any other school since Kirby arrived. And, everybody talks about the defense, and Kirby's a defensive coach. Well, we put some big men in the league now, and some guys that have some pretty unique qualities too. So it's a point of emphasis, and obviously it's going to be an important one for the season because offensive line is a volatile position. I mean, these guys are ramming into a 300-pound man across from them every single play. So there's going to be injuries. There's going to be a little bit of attrition. So you got to have depth. And last year we rotated 7 guys every single game, and you don't see that. That's just not something that happens. Usually teams have 5 guys and they just play those guys. We rotate, and it's pretty amazing to see how that works out. So that's probably a longer spiel than you wanted, but yeah.
No, that's perfect.
2 guys I want to ask you about, going back to maybe touching on Jake's question. Maybe you were going to talk, I might have cut you off. Yazid Haynes and Dylan Bell, 2 wide receivers. And those were guys that I feel like, and you may correct me here, those guys were camp offers. You worked them out, and the staff was like, hey, we got to sign these kids. So you talk about some guys that may not kind of see the first minutes, but guys, I'm hearing kind of some off-season buzz about.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Bell was a guy that, I talked about last time about Dylan Rayola being a relative unknown, and Dylan Bell was the same way. Mm-hmm. He was going around different colleges, working out at camps, came to our camp, worked out really well. He's a pretty unique wide receiver frame. He's about 6 foot. He's 210, 215, so he's really stout. And that's not a frame you often see a wideout. That's a frame you often see at running back. But, seeing him go around cones, change directions, seeing the twitch and the quickness, he was a guy that we were really, really high on after his workout. And, I remember Monk was like, we were all talking about him, and Monk, who has a really strong background with receivers, when he was an offensive coordinator in the NFL, a lot of the time he wasn't coaching the quarterbacks, he was coaching wide receivers. And, he was so good at putting things in a really concise way. And he just goes, guys, it's like, you don't see 210-pound guys get in and out of breaks like that. That's all he said. And that was it. And a lot of times this stuff is that simple. And, obviously we signed him. I think last year he had a promising freshman season, and I'm excited to see how he can build it. And I think he's a guy that gives you some versatility. He can play outside. He can play inside. He's good with the ball in his hands. And, again, he's a good kid and he's smart. He learns well. So that's important. And then with Yazid, Yazid was another camp eval, but it wasn't at our camp. So the NCAA still allows for schools to come to other camps. So, every summer, we would host, University of Pittsburgh, Appalachian State, whatever. All these different schools would come to our camp and watch and evaluate. And they're not necessarily watching the upper end, Georgia prospects, quote unquote, but they're just trying to see if they can get a steal out of the state of Georgia or from wherever. And it goes both ways. We can go to other camps. So, we sent a couple coaches up to the Temple camp up in Philly and saw Yazid Haynes work out. And I remember there were only like 10 clips. And, BMAC gives me the camera. We get the film uploaded. And I'm like, damn, BMAC. Like, we couldn't have gotten a little more than 10 clips. But just on those 10 clips, you could see the change direction. You could see the twitch. And you could see the speed. And then we got him back down and worked out again. And, it was pretty clear that this guy was a really, really good athlete that was under the radar. And BMAC and Fran Brown did a hell of a job, signing Yazid. And, he flashed a little bit when he enrolled in December. But you can't look much into what happens in December, semifinal practices. But, he got there really, really early and showed some of the tools that we saw when he was recruited. So I'm excited to see what he does. I definitely think he's a guy that needs to add weight. You know, when we were recruiting him, he was really, really light, but he's a developmental prospect that has really, really good speed. And when you look at the wide receiver position, the position now more than ever is defined by speed. You know, I think for a long time in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, you know, you wanted these 6'4", 6'5", ball skills, red zone targets. And I think the position has evolved where you want guys that can just flat out run and can take the ball 60 yards to the house. And
what a concept, man.
yeah. And that's just the way the game's evolved. But yeah, like I said, I think Yazzie can really run. Hopefully he's been able to put on some weight. I don't know if he has, but he'll definitely have some opportunity there.
Matt, I got one more, and I want to get to some comments in the live chat here before we move on to some current recruiting talk. And I know Rusty wanted to squeeze one more in there too, but you know, obviously a little bit changing with the offensive coordinator situation. You know, Bobo was there, you know, analyzing the offense and all that. But what is a quarterback competition going to look like in this camp? Kirby, you know, he's not going to announce a starter right now. We all know that. Beck is presumably putting the pieces together, but with this much talent in this quarterback room, it's wide open with Stetson gone now. What does this look like, especially with Monken no longer here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, the transition in terms of coordinator will be pretty smooth. You know, Bobo was here last year. He's a really good football coach. He's really bright. He's a really good communicator. I think he has a good relationship with all those guys. But really, in fall camp with that competition, you're trying to, create game-like scenarios, so situational football, third down, red zone, you know, 1-minute drive, 2-minute drill, stuff like that. But ultimately, you're trying to give each guy a fair shot. And, you know, it's pretty simple how you do that. You have guys rep with different groups and against different groups. So you're going to have each quarterback rep with the ones, rep with the twos. You're going to have them go against the ones. They're going to go against the twos. So you're trying to put them in as many different equitable situations as possible so that you can get the best possible evaluation. And, you know, that takes a lot of effort, you know, on the team, you know, with Mike Bobo and the offensive staff kind of distributing reps. But, you know, in the past, we've done a really good job with that. I know we'll do a really good job with that this year. And, I mean, there's still a competition, you know. Carson's obviously really, really talented, but so is Brock Vandegrift. And let's not forget about Gunnar Stockton. So I think, you know, there's a good problem on our hands with 3 really good quarterbacks. And ultimately, it's going to play itself out in practice and those scrimmages. You know, those 2 scrimmages that we get in the fall are so big. And they're a huge evaluation point, not just for the quarterback position, but for the entire roster. Because, you know, practice translates to game some, but those scrimmages translate a little bit more just because there's a little bit more pressure. So the players, it's always good to see who's going to perform well with the lights on, so to speak.
I know your program still. You're not employed at University of Georgia, but I know your mindset. So I'm not going to put you on the spot too much on a 24 class because those kids aren't signed. But I do want to ask you general question. Stacy Searles, the offensive line class, he is signed. And let me ask you this 2-part question. What's your thoughts on what Georgia has done O-line class? And there's 2 kind of thoughts of O-line recruiting. Either you want a kid that's 6'6", 270 that you can build into 300, or you want a kid that's 6'7", 360 that you want to try to get down to 340 to play. You know, the 2-part question there kind of on the O-line recruiting and O-line thoughts evaluation-wise.
Yeah, I think hats off to Coach Searles. You know, I think when you're coming into a staff with Kirby, you know, it's an adjustment period for assistant coaches. It just is. And some sink and some swim. And I think Stacey Searles is definitely a guy that started swimming this year. But, I mean, I'm really impressed with those guys. They're big. They're athletic. They're smart. They're versatile. And that's what you're looking for. You know, and really, I think at a place like Georgia, offensive line evaluations are I wouldn't say easy, but they're maybe easier than other positions. But I mean, hats off to them. It's not just Coach Searles. It's Man Ray Santamore, his GA, Jeremy King, David Cooper, Fran Brown, Todd Hartley, even Del McGee. It was a full team effort, and they really came together, and they've got some good players. But going back to kind of the evaluation recruiting philosophy, the strategy that's worked for us is taking the 6'7", 360-pound guys and trimming them down. Mm-hmm. And, that's not a Stacey Searles thing. That's not a Matt Luke thing. That's not a Sam Pittman thing. That's a Kirby Smart thing. And really that idea, it derives all the way back to Bill Parcells. It's Bill Parcells, it's Bill Belichick, it's Nick Saban, it's Kirby. And I think Kirby obsesses over the size aspect maybe more than any of the other three guys I just mentioned. So at Georgia, we want big guys that can move. And, that there's a saying that I'm sure people have heard, but big people hurt little people. And I'll leave you with that. So,
man, that list of names you just mentioned is going to get a lot of Georgia fans irrationally excited. That is pretty good company for Kirby to be in. Matt, stick with us for a couple more minutes if you don't mind. We're going to get to some questions from our message board and in the comments. We'll just buzz right through them. Before we do that, though, I got to shout out our people at Bird Dogs, birddogs.com/dogs. Listen, y'all have been listening to us talk about these pants and these shorts. As you can see, I've got the shirt on today. And now if you go to birddogs.com/dogs or use the checkout code dogs, you don't get the tumbler anymore. They ran out of those because so many of y'all bought it. Now they got these hats, okay? I don't know. This is the first time I put it on as my internet just goes to hell. I don't know if this hat is for me, but maybe it's for you. So go to birddogs.com/dogs. Check it out. They got the best shorts, man. I'm telling you, it feels like I'm not wearing shorts. I walked outside and I had a panic attack because I thought I wasn't wearing pants, but I was. I was wearing Bird Dogs. They're that comfortable. Go to birddogs.com/dogs. Matt, so we got some questions here in the chat. Our guy Alex Jarriett, maybe the team silent.
Jarriett, it's something like that.
Yeah. He's been pretty patient here, and he wants to ask you about Jalen Walker's transition to inside linebacker. Really unique skill set. He's a big person who can probably hurt some little people.
Yeah. Jalen is a guy we recruited to be an inside linebacker. Jalen's dad was a college head coach, which anytime you can sign a coach's son, I think that's always a good opportunity. Jalen was a good track athlete. He was a good basketball player. So really well-rounded athlete. And he came in last year, started at ILB, and really through lack of depth, we realized he was a guy that can contribute on third down. And he, it's hard to find guys that can play inside linebacker and outside linebacker. And he's one of those guys who can, because he's got really good flexibility. He's really twitchy. He can run. He can bend. And even though he's probably about 6'1.5", he's got good enough length and long enough arms where he doesn't get swallowed up by offensive linemen, because that's the issue you run into with a lot of times with those, short sawed-off guys, is they just kind of get swallowed up. With a guy as long as Amarius Mims, they just can't get to their body because that offensive tackle's arms are so much longer. But Jalen's got really good length. He picked up the playbook really well. And, he was flexible. He was willing to, kind of try a different position if it meant A, getting on the field, and B, helping the team more importantly. So, really, I think we've always viewed Jalen as an inside linebacker, but he stepped up when we needed them, on third down with the pass rush. And I think, there's a good chance that he'll have a role there this year. But, really, I think on a down-to-down basis, his long-term future as it is at inside linebacker based on his size and athletic ability and his intelligence. It takes intelligent people to play inside linebacker at Georgia, at Alabama, And I think, he has that. And I think he's got a really bright future in whatever capacity they need. And, versatility at every position, both sides of the ball, is such an important quality to have. And Jalen's obviously proven that he has versatility. So I'm excited to see what he does this year and in the future. Obviously, there's some really good players in that inside linebacker room, and there's some really good players in that outside linebacker room. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shapes up.
Got a couple more. Got one from our message board. When evaluating personnel and setting recruiting priorities, which, if any, positions have a greater emphasis on their height and weight and speed versus their documented performance on the field, if that makes sense? Did you follow that question? Do I need to rephrase that?
That absolutely makes sense. Ideally, you want both. You want a guy that's a dominant player. You want a guy that's big. You want a guy that's fast. But, at Georgia's core, at Kirby's core, at Nick Saban's core, going back all the way to Bill Parcells, that's where all this ideology comes from. But we are a height, weight, speed program. And, we've taken some exceptions over the years. But if you take too many exceptions, you get yourself beat. And usually exceptions work out because they have some exceptional qualities. Maybe you take a guy that's a 5'9" wideout, but he runs a 4.3. 4.3 speed is an exceptional quality where he can make up for his lack of size. So, we want big people that are fast, and ultimately we have a really good coaching staff. They're going to be able to develop them. So, we've taken some raw players. We've taken some projects. And, we're willing to take that risk because what Kirby's done over 7 years is he's built up really good depth, and you can take more chances when you've got good depth. You can take a flyer on a guy that may be a 2-3 year project because you've got really good players in front of them. So you don't need them to be good early. But, really, you want guys that are good on tape. You don't want a guy that's getting beat up on tape. But, I'll use an example. Andrew Thomas just signed a contract for $117 million with the New York Giants, most guaranteed money ever for an offensive line contract. This guy gave up 5 sacks in one single high school game. That happened, And you say, how in the world is that possible? Well, he didn't have good technique. He didn't know what he was doing. But, he got to Georgia. He developed. He cared. And he developed into a hell of a player. And a big reason, he was intelligent and he was big and he can move. So, like I said, obviously you want the best of both worlds. And there's times where we just take a good football player. But, when you see Georgia get off the bus, I mean, it's different. And I think anybody went to that national championship game, when you looked at our team versus the other team, there's a noticeable difference. So
I went to see Andrew Thomas play Lovett one night, and he played both ways, and I thought, my God, this kid is not going to make it. But he couldn't get over it. He couldn't get in a stance in the second quarter because he was give out. But he was playing both ways, and I thought, man, oh boy. But they got upset that year early in the playoffs, and he went to work. And when he came to San Antonio, he was the best offensive lineman there. So I figured he was going to be okay. But I know what you're talking about. I saw him play Lovett one night in a pace game, and man, he was sucking eggs and chasing little bitty DNs. I was like, oh, man, this guy's never going to play at Georgia much. But he got his mind right and got in shape. And come January, he was the best offensive lineman out there that whole week. And that was kind of prelude to what was going to happen with him.
And particularly with Andrew and offensive line, he's got special length and he can really move. And, especially up front, that's probably the position where we take less exceptions. You hear conversations revolving around personnel with O-line and D-line. You hear the word frame a lot. He's got a good frame. This guy doesn't have great tape, but he's got a good frame. Or this guy has good tape, but he doesn't have a great frame. So, you want guys with frames that can move, that have functional movement ability. And, the best place to evaluate that is camp. But, I mean, you can get it off tape too. So, again, that was a long answer. I know I'm long-winded, but like I said, we're at a high weight speed program, but we also want guys that are good on tape.
That's why we bring you on, Matt. We appreciate it, dude. You have been just great tonight. Thank you for all your insight. It's been awesome. I don't have anything else. Rusty?
No, we're going to have him on. I hadn't even asked him, but I'm just going ahead and tell you, Matt, we're going to have you on quite a bit during the season. And some of the games, as we get into week 2, Georgia's got Ball State, and you got Alabama, Texas. I know you evaluated a lot of those kids, so I'd like to have you on some of those times to talk about some of those teams and some of those rosters, because let's face it, Alabama and Georgia recruit the same kids, so you're going to know a lot of those guys and kind of what you think. But man, enjoyed having you on again tonight. You got your iMessage ding. You can tell Mom you did a good job there. You were good and cleared up for tonight, so I appreciate you being on tonight with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. I had fun.
Yep, we did too. We're going to end it on that note. We'll catch you back here this Sunday, 8:30 p.m. on the Georgia Show, 9 o'clock on Monday for Bark After Dark. It's football season, y'all. Exciting times. We'll catch you soon.